Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 4 of season 6. We're following Paul and kind of correlating what happens in the book of Galatians, because it was written halfway through the book of Acts. And we're coordinating the events from Galatia to the events in the book of Acts. Okay, so what Paul is doing is he's yelling at the Galatians a little bit. And what he's doing is he's establishing his credentials, and he's going back to how he became a believer and what the Lord had done with him in the meantime. And he's going to refer here in the book of Galatians to a couple things that happened in the book of Acts. So we're going to flip back in forth just a little bit. I'm going to read from the book of Galatians, and then we'll dissect what he's meaning about this. This is from Galatians chapter 2. There's only two official verses today. This is Galatians 2, verses 1 and 2. Here's verse 1. Then after 14 years, I went up again to Jerusalem with Barnabas, taking Titus along with me. So let me just pause there. So what we're going to do today is we're going to fill in those 14 years from about 34 AD to 48 AD. And where has he been all this time? And what did the people in the Jerusalem church think about him during that period of time? So after 14 years, so we have to fill in the blanks, he's going to go up again to Jerusalem. He's already been there one time. The first time was kind of a disaster. We'll talk about that. And we're going to talk about the person Barnabas, who's going to go along with him. This is verse 2 now. I went up, that is to Jerusalem, for the second visit because of a revelation. Well, that was from a guy named Agabus in Acts chapter 11, who had a prophecy that there was going to be this horrible famine. So Paul is 300 or 400 miles away, and he collects money and brings it back to Jerusalem. And so that's why he went back up to Jerusalem in Galatians 2:2. They finished the Galatians 2. I went up because of revelation and set before them, though privately before those who seem influential, the gospel I had proclaimed among the Gentiles, in order to make sure that I was not running or had run in vain. And so the church leaders in Jerusalem were basically suspicious about this guy who had a ministry 300 and 400 miles away for 14 years. And they're wondering just a little bit, are you a Christian? So let's go through Paul's credentials for these couple of years. All right, so first of all, let me just start back in Acts chapter 9. That's after his conversion, and Paul immediately starts proclaiming to the Jews in the synagogues, and then he goes away for 3 years into Arabia after the Jews in Damascus start to try to kill him. He's let down through the wall. He goes off to Arabia for 3 years, and I think learns all about being a Christian at that time. So that's part of the 14 years. That's the first 3 years of the 14 years. And then he visits Jerusalem. Now, this is hilarious because in Acts chapter 9, verse 26, he attempts to join the disciples, and they are afraid of him and don't believe that he was a disciple. In other words, 3 years into Saul's, they're still calling him Saul at this point, Saul's Christianity, the Jews, or the Christians of Jerusalem do not believe that he is a Christian. So Barnabas has to somehow he has a relationship with Barnabas. This is where his relationship starts. Somehow Barnabas has to take him and bring him to the apostles because, I don't know, maybe they're so suspicious of him, and declared to them how on the road that he had seen the Lord and that he's been preaching for a number of years. And then he goes out into Jerusalem and preaches there. He disputes with the Jews there in Jerusalem, but the dispute becomes so hostile, they were seeking to kill him. And so the Christians in Jerusalem, on Paul's first trip to Jerusalem, sent him off to Tarsus, which is kind of his hometown or his hometown region at least. And he is there for maybe 8 to 10 years. So from the years of 34 AD, 3 of it's spent in Arabia. He has a quick visit to Jerusalem. Galatians tells us it's only 2 weeks long. Then the Jews there try to kill him. So the Christians there send him up to his hometown area. He's there for 8 or 10 years. This takes us to maybe 45 AD or so. And then a second thing happens, and that is the Christian church hears about good work that's being done with Gentiles up in 300 miles north, and of interest in Antioch, Syria, or Antakya, Turkey is where that is today. The gospel is being preached, but it's not by Paul. It's not by Saul. It's by some other men. So the Jerusalem Jews send an emissary up there to check it out. The emissary's name is Barnabas again, and the Christians that are preaching about Christ is not Paul. But after he's done with that, Barnabas does go to Tarsus and looks for Saul. And when he had found him, so this is from Acts chapter 11, and when Barnabas finds Saul, they're still calling him Saul, he brings him to Antioch. And then listen what happens in Antioch. So this is the last year that Paul is sort of out in the not wilderness, but out in the boondocks for sure. For a whole year, they met with the church. That's the church in Antioch, taught a great many people. And in Antioch, the disciples were first called Christians. Isn't that cool? So now this is getting close to the time where Paul is going to head back to Jerusalem, get his act together, and go off on his first missionary journey. So how does he get there? Well, it says in Acts chapter 11, verse 27, in those days prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. One of them named Agabus talks about a famine. So they gathered each one according to his ability, and then they head down to Jerusalem. Who goes? Barnabas and Saul. This is about 47 AD. So Paul was accused of not being a believer at 3 years into his belief. And finally, he's going to come back down to Jerusalem and support his ministry and tell them that, yes, I am a Christian. Here's all the fantastic things I've been doing. So I've just been wondering, if someone accused you of being a Christian for the last 14 years, could you make a defense? Paul certainly could. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for listening.